Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and fellow citizens of the world, I come before you today, honored to be the representative of Africa, challenged by the task at hand, and deeply angered by the fact that Africa is the richest continent in the world in terms of natural resources, yet it is home to the poorest people in the world. That's a paradox that should never surprise us because it is by design, not by chance. Africa is a continent with vast potential, yet the potential remains largely untapped. Again, that is by design, not by chance. Africa is a continent with the most loving people, yet it is full of conflicts with the guns singing in chorus. Again, that is by design, not by chance. In Africa, we live by chance and die by design. I look forward to the Africa in which we will live by design and die by chance. Fellow global citizens, on October 24th, 1945, the United Nations Charter entered into force, marking the official establishment of the United Nations out of the ashes of World War II, to prevent future conflicts and promote peace, development, and human rights. Today we should recall these wise words of Henry Ford. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. Today, October 24th, 2024, as we gather here at the UN Summit to commemorate the UN Day, we must reaffirm our shared commitment to global unity, solidarity, and cooperation. Since its formation, the UN has strived to prevent wars and conflicts, promote decolonization, support disarmament, advance human rights, and address global health crisis. However, the same UN, which campaigns for global equality among countries through the Sustainable Development Goal number 10, is an institution with inequality as one of the core foundational stones in its governing structure. The UN Security Council has only 5 permanent members, namely China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US. Those countries have veto power, which the non-permanent members don't have. That is inequality of the highest order, which must be condemned by every right-thinking person in the world. Calling for reforms in the UN Security Council at the 26th African Union Summit in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Robert Mugabe, the then African Union Chair and the President of Zimbabwe, said, "We have asked and asked and asked and asked and asked and asked. Reform the Security Council. If the United Nations is to survive, we must be equal members of it. Members with a voice that is understood, respected, and honored." This is what right-thinking African presidents who really serve the interests of Africa must advocate for. President Robert Mugabe is dead, but the call for reforms of the UN Security Council is alive and well. We must continue with the call until the reforms are made. Today, as we commemorate the UN Day, as people of goodwill, we must re-echo at the top of our voices the call for reforms in the UN Security Council. Demand that your government push for the reforms. We need equal representation at the UN Security Council if the UN is truly a global institution that seeks to promote equality within and among countries. In Africa, African governments must demand for the reforms through the African Union, but they must first put their collective house, the African Union, in order. We should not preach water, yet drink wine. We should drink what we preach and preach what we drink. Fellow global citizens, we meet at a time when the world is facing unprecedented challenges that will shape the future of the world for the foreseeable future. From Africa to Asia, to Europe, to North America, to South America, to Australia, to Antarctica, the world is flaming with conflicts, geopolitical divisions, and the climate crisis that are threatening our very existence to the core. There is no better time to work together to address global crises than now. This year's UN Summit focuses on Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth, and Sustainable Development Goal number 17, which is partnerships for the goals. Africa has made significant strides to achieve economic growth. From Rwanda's innovation hubs to Ghana's entrepreneurship programs, African countries are implementing innovative strategies for economic growth. However, despite several efforts at local, national, and international levels to improve working conditions and achieve economic growth, today, decent work and economic growth remain only a dream rather than a reality for all, especially in Africa. We are taking baby steps, yet we want to achieve giant results. Going forward, we should stop taking baby steps and start taking giant steps if we must achieve giant results. The African Continental Free Trade Area is a beacon of hope, promising to promote economic integration, cooperation, and development in Africa. Accordingly, it has the potential to transform the economies of all African countries. However, the beautiful promises will never be realized without proper and inclusive implementation. Sustainable development demands sustainable leadership. If we must have decent work and achieve any meaningful economic growth, then sustainable leadership is a must. Today, in most African countries, the people are working so hard to achieve economic growth, but their governments are failing them by grabbing their land, failing to regulate the prices of commodities in the markets, offering limited support to farmers, and failing to ensure peace and stability. Most African governments are failing their own people because of politics, selfishness, and greed. Which African governments are failing their own people? This knowledge is in the public domain. In the wise words of the great Mahatma Gandhi, the world has enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. We live in a world in which greed is the creed of most people, especially those who hold positions of leadership, especially in Africa. How can such people lead their people to have decent work and achieve economic growth? If greed is our creed, then we cannot adequately meet our people's single collective need. History has shown that a greedy person is an exploiter. Africa has for long been exploited by several exploiters who pursue only their interests at the expense of Africa's interest. Ronald Reagan, the 40th president of the US, once said, "America does what is in our best interest." The question we must ask today is this: do all those who occupy positions of leadership from the village level up to the presidency in Africa pursue the interests of their people? The answer is a big no. Africa was thrown into a deep pit by her exploiters, who now claim to be helping her to get out of the pit. The same exploiters who threw Africa into the pit can never pull her out because Africa's presence in the pit benefits them. So they appear to be helping Africa, yet at the same time, they work so hard behind the scene to keep Africa in the pit. For Africa to achieve any meaningful development, she must have leaders who actually lead. The question is, when will we have leaders who will lead? In the infallible words of the greatest Pan-Africanist of our time, Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, Africa is on a dinner table as food being eaten by France, China, the US, the UK, and other civilizations. For how long shall Africa be food on a dinner table or civilization? My fellow Africans, the time has come for Africa to also sit at the dinner table as a diner, not as food to be eaten by other civilizations. We must position Africa to take up our place at the dinner table as a diner. How shall we do that? By taking charge of our resources, both human and natural. We must own them. We must not be exporters of raw materials. We must process the raw materials and export the finished products. We must add value to our coffee. We must add value to our cocoa. We must add value to our gold. We must add value to our cobalt. We must add value to our cotton. We must add value to our tea. We must add value to all our raw materials and export the finished products, not the raw materials. Only when we take charge of manufacture will Africa ever sit at the dinner table as a diner. Otherwise, she will forever be food on the table to be eaten by other civilizations. We must maximize our resources right from the village level up to the international level. We must seek proper education that decolonizes our minds and makes us craft realistic African solutions to African problems. We must evolve with the evolving technology and seize the opportunities that it represents. We must rise and lead, but not lag behind. We must think, create, and innovate. We cannot be on the receiving end of everything as Africans. Africa should not be the dumping ground for second-hand and low-quality products from Asia, Europe, and America. We must manufacture first-hand products ourselves for our people. As Africans, we are not second-class people. We are first-class people. We are kings and queens. We are legends. We are the children of the cradle of human civilization. We deserve the best of the best. My fellow Africans, we must therefore open our eyes, ears, and minds and take the lead in designing our destiny. Our destiny must be in our hands. No one can best design our destiny for us. We must utilize our resources for the benefit of our people. Our land, waters, airspaces, and human capital must all be used to benefit our people first, before they benefit any other civilization. We must work the land to learn the work. Let us work our fertile land so that we can feed ourselves and stop importing what we can produce ourselves. No one will respect us if we don't have food security. Whoever gives us food will control even how we should eat. Hear me well, fellow Africans. Land is the most important factor of production. Land is the most important factor of production. Guard your land from the hungry predators who are looking for land to devour, grab, and own. Sustainable Development Goal number 17 is a global call for global unity. This goal determines whether or not all the other goals will be achieved, locally, nationally, and globally. It is common knowledge that unity is only possible where there is a central uniting factor and we have collective interests. But where we put personal interests above collective interests, unity is impossible. Where there is no central uniting factor, individualism prevails and unity is impossible. A successful sustainable development agenda requires partnerships among governments, the private sector, and civil society. These inclusive partnerships built upon principles and values, a shared vision, and shared goals that place the people and the planet at the center are needed at the global, regional, national, and local levels. Unfortunately, at a time when we need more unity than ever, we are more divided than ever at local, national, and international levels. How then can we partner to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? How then can we work together to change the lives of our people? How then can we design the world that we want? Going forward, Africa needs genuine global partners, not global exploiters. Fellow Africans, our unity is in our hands. We must never forget this wisdom of our elders. When the locusts are fighting, it is the joy of the hawks, because if they kill each other, then the hawks get the food easily. We must always remember that we are all locusts. Therefore, we must never fight among ourselves. Let us not make it easy for the hawks to eat us by fighting among ourselves and killing each other. As long as we are divided, we will fight among ourselves. As long as we fight among ourselves, the hawks will exploit us. As long as the hawks exploit us, we will remain poor. Any people who want to progress cannot afford to be disunited. African wisdom teaches that to go fast, go alone. To go far, go together. If we must go far as a people, then we must go together. Therefore, let us go together as Africans so that we can achieve what we want as a people. Nobody will come from any place and do for us what we are supposed to do ourselves. Nobody will come from any place and fight for our future for us. Nobody will come from any place and build our lives for us. The onus is on us Africans to work so hard and build our continent. We are the people to do the work. No other civilization can best build Africa for us. No other civilization knows best what we want as Africans. No other civilization can best tell us what to do to build our future as Africans. Fellow citizens of the world, as we strive for the better world, let us always remember the immortal words of Alexander the Great. Upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. Our individual actions collectively shape our collective future as humanity. Therefore, let us partner for a better world. With global partnerships, we will create meaningful opportunities for economic growth. Let us persist as we use what we have to get what we lack. Let us desist from exploiting each other. Let us resist being exploited. In a world in which we face more challenges than ever, if we must thrive and survive, then we must strive collectively. With unquestionable unity, we will get to the promised land as humanity. The question is, shall we genuinely unite and collectively pursue sustainable development, especially in Africa?